to make some frozen mocha cheesecake. This is a nice dessert to have on hand because it stays in the freezer and you just take out the little bits that you need at a time and you don't have to use it all up at once. So we're going to start with half a cup of melted butter or margarine, and we're going to add in 1.5 cups of graham crumbs. And we have a 1/4 cup of sugar and a 1/4 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. This you can just mix up by hand. You don't need a big mixer for this, especially when the butter or margarine is already melted. And we're going to put this into a spring-form pan. It's just one of these pans where you can take the sides off later. And we're just going to mix this up. But we want to make sure we also take about a 1/4 cup away to reserve for some decorations on top later. So we'll pull that out and we're just going to pack this into our pan. It's not a very thick crust on the bottom, so it's a little bit of work to make sure you get it spread out throughout the whole pan. But just press that down with your hands if you like, or you can use a spoon. I just always feel like if I use my hands, I can just get a better feel of it. So we're going to get this pressed in here before we do the next layer. And then I'll get my counter cleaned up and get things set up for the next layer. So get this pressed in here. You don't have to bake this or anything. This just stays like this, waiting for the next layer. For our cheesecake layer, we are going to use 8 ounces of cream cheese. So one of these blocks that's 250 grams is approximately 8 ounces. You can use a no name or light or regular. It doesn't really matter which kind you use. But I've softened it in the microwave as well for 30 seconds because it's important that this is very soft because you don't want to have any lumps in this layer. So I'm going to be whipping this up for a little bit in my mixer so it's nice and soft. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. Alright, so our cream cheese is nice and soft. I've scraped the bottom one other time to make sure there was no lumps in the very bottom. And I'm going to mix this well between each thing I add because I want to make sure there's not going to be any clumps in there. So the next thing I'm going to add is 2/3 of a cup of chocolate syrup. You can use a no name or Nesquik, doesn't really matter. We're just going to add the sweetened chocolate syrup into here. And I'm going to give that a mix. So I want everything to be incorporated really well. And I'm going to scrape the bottom of my bowl a couple of times here because I want to make sure I'm getting all the way to the bottom because I don't want to have any clumps of the cream cheese. You know that cream cheese right on the bottom? I want to make sure I get it all. A little bit of a messy job. But I'm going to add in a can of the sweetened condensed milk as well. So once I've got that in there, I'm going to mix it again because I want to make sure there's no lumps at all. Basically, this layer is like an ice cream because it's going to be in the freezer. So you want all that nice and smooth and creamy. And I'm going to just scrape the bottom of my bowl again to make sure I'm getting all the way to the bottom. Not seeing any big lumps of cream cheese, so that's good. All right. And the next thing I'm going to add, I have here, this is just some instant coffee, 1 tablespoon of instant coffee powder, and I've added about a teaspoon of water just so I can make it liquidy because you don't want to have the grains of your instant coffee in here because it won't dissolve in the cold part. But if you just dissolve it in a little bit of hot water, this is going to give you your mocha flavoring. So any instant coffee, you don't really want to use regular coffee that you've just brewed because that's going to be adding too much water. So this is just a little bit of instant coffee with just a touch of water just to dissolve those crystals. Just going to mix that in and And there's one more ingredient in here. So the last thing I've done is I've already whipped up ahead of time. You can use anywhere from the 250, so the small little one, or the 500 ml of the whipped cream. I like to use the bigger container. And I've just whipped that up. I have not added any sugar in because there's plenty of sugar in here already. And I'm going to fold this into here. I probably don't even need my mixer. I'm just going to fold it in by hand. So I'm just going to get some things off my counter while I do that to show you how the next step. The reason I'm not mixing this with my mixer is I don't want to take all the air out of my whipping cream. So I'm just going to fold this in by hand. Looks so pretty. If you really like the marbly look, you could don't over mix it and you could pour it in just like this so you have a bit of a marbly look in your cake. But I like to mix it all the way through so the flavors go through nice. So just take your time with this. All right. And because I'm using the 500 ml of whipping cream instead of the 250 ml, my batter is much lighter color here. If you use a smaller amount, of course, it would be a little bit of a darker brown. And we're going to just pour this over top of our crumb base. I like to use the 500 ml because then it just makes a bit of a thicker cake on the top. Just makes a nice cake, the nice topping on there. Don't want to waste any, so clean out your bowl. Still have a little bit of marbling in there, but that's okay. Just going to get this all in there. All right. And then we have that little bit of reserved crumb that we had from the bottom, from the base, that I had put in a little cup here. And you're just going to want to sprinkle this on top to decorate the top. And when you serve your cake, you can also drizzle some chocolate syrup over top on each piece to make your cake look really pretty on the plate. So now you're going to have to freeze this. So cover up the top with some saran wrap. Put it in the freezer, make sure it's not going to be sitting crooked. You want to make sure it's sitting nice and flat. And ideally freeze this overnight because you want this to be frozen hard. You're basically making ice cream, so we want this to be nice and solid before you would even serve it and cut it up. So there's our top. Clean up the side a little bit. So we're going to get this in the freezer overnight. Not going to sure if I'm going to get around to having a picture for you for when it's done. I'll have to see because I don't know when I'm going to serve it next. But when it's completely frozen, you can take it out of your springform pan and cut it ahead of time and then store it in containers. So when you have company, it's easy to quickly grab one or two pieces, because when you're trying to cut it when it's completely frozen, it's a little bit hard to cut. So I like to pull it out when it's completely frozen, do my cutting ahead of time. You can get quite a few pieces out of here because it's a rich dessert, so you don't need a very big slice. I can't remember how many I cut it into. There's at least 16 pieces I usually do. So this frozen mocha cheesecake, great dessert to have. You can keep it in your freezer until the company comes. Frozen mocha cheesecake has been in the freezer overnight. So you're going to get it out of your springform pan. And then you want to get this off of the base so that you can cut it. So I'm just going to get in a sharp knife here and try and pry that loose. Oh, there it's coming. All right. And now we're going to cut it. And the first cut is going to be your hardest. My knife is not that sharp, but it's a taller knife, so I wanted to try and, you want to get right down to that crust. Oh, there we go. And once you get it in half, it'll be easier to cut the other pieces. There we go. See, look at that, isn't that beautiful? And now we're just going to, now this is where you're going to decide what sizes you want. If I did this now in 4, it's a pretty big piece. So you could do these in 5s if you like, so it's a little bit smaller of a piece. And then that would give you 20 servings on this tray. So I'm just going to put this one on a plate. And don't forget to drizzle some chocolate syrup over top for decoration. And there you have your frozen mocha cheesecake.